Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Let me make sure this is coming through. I see green all around. I'm assuming the world is good. So friend of the show that I don't think he knows he's a friend of the show, Glen from Black Agenda Report, has released an article that I'm going to go over because I think the article is awesome. I think the article is awesome to a few fronts. One, in how it deals with this thing of race. That's the first point. But second, from the standpoint of perspective. And let me show you what I mean. The title of this is House of Representatives Negroes Rally Against Russia. So essentially, House of Negroes rally against Russia. He's making a point. He's making a very particular point. What takes place in regards to the Democratic Party when they're calling themselves resistance? The question I've always asked, and I continuously ask, what are you resisting and when did you start? Now, I asked that for a very particular point because it seems that they are angry at Trump, but how are you angry at Trump at certain things that the last guy was doing that you seem to be okay with? House Negroes rally against Russia. I'm going to read this. The article is awesome. Look, if you're going to call yourself a resistance, and you're going to call yourself, we're the Democratic Party, and we believe in whatever you say you believe in, things will be different. That's all I'm saying. It is impossible to look at the way the Democratic Party is arranged. Like Nancy Pelosi, we're capitalists. We're capitalists. All right, yes, you are capitalists. And I can make the point, and I would imagine Glen may agree with me, that a lot of the issues that are associated with poverty and associated with crime and all this other stuff are related to politics, policy. What these people are doing in those offices. What is the social safety net that this country has at its disposal? How easy is it for people to go to college? How good is it, or how easy is it for them to find work? And I don't mean in this Republican cartoonish way where you give millionaires tax cuts and all of a sudden they create jobs. No, I'm talking about government intervention and making sure those things are adequate in our society. So yes, government job guarantee would be an awesome way to do that. You can eliminate poverty overnight. What are the policies you're willing to put forward to actually get things done? That's what I'm getting at. The Democratic Party, as the Democratic Party stands, is a status quo party. They're okay with the way things are. They think things can be changed by these marginal changes around the edges. Yeah, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. You've had 20, 30 years of particular policies that were, for the most part, agreed upon by Republicans and Democrats. Democrats were just a little bit lighter in regards to the touch that they gave it, but they were still giving it, for the most part, the same touch. So, yes, when you have all of this stuff pop off, all this populism on the left and the right, emblematic by Bernie Sanders and by Donald Trump, you have certain elements that say, holy shit, we need to tamp this down. Well, from the standpoint of African Americans, Congressional Black Caucus at your disposal. So this is somewhat of the argument that Glen makes, but I actually agree with him on it. Let me read through the article, because the article is awesome. House of Representatives, that's in parentheses, Negroes rally against Russia. All right, so the Congressional Black Caucus is the heart and the soul of the resistant movement in Congress, said California Representative Barbara Lee, speaking at the State of the Black American panel at Langley College in Oakland last week. Lee's right. She and her black corporate Democrat colleagues are in forefront of a kind of quote-unquote resistance, but not the resistance to the routine murder of blacks by police, or the economic race to the bottom led by the caucus's patrons on Wall Street, or to gentrification, hypermilitarization, and war. Instead, the Congressional Black Caucus wages a desperate resistance to the incipient grassroots movements that emerged in Ferguson, Missouri 3 years ago. We're talking about these movements that cropped up because of cop killings, Black Lives Matter. The perversion of the resistance now speaks in an anti-Russian tirades, but that's only the Congressional Black Caucus' latest diversionary tactic as it scrambles to reclaim its squandered legacy. What are you resisting, and when did you start? That question is damning, which is why I continuously ask it. What are you resisting, and when did you start? There are going to be some members who can make this claim of saying, yes, I was in the civil rights movement and everything else. I'm talking about the last 30, 40 years. We're bombing one country after the next. None of them say squat. You may get some, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, for the most part, the Democratic Party is just as obsequious to Wall Street and just as obsequious to war as the Republican Party. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. When the vote came up, when Rand Paul stood in the well of Congress and shamed Congress into actually voting for what takes place in regards to giving Trump all of this military might, the presidency, this imperial presidency, they called Donald Trump every name in a book, every name but a child of God, and yet they continued to give him the authorization to bomb and murder as many people as he wants. What are you resisting? And when did you start? Like the rest of the black misleadership class, he calls them the black misleadership class, by the way, the caucus feared that the revival of movement politics might unleash forces that could not be contained. The black elite's job is to keep the lid on black protests, the real resistance, so that the dispersal, disempowerment, and demoralization of black communities can be accomplished with as little disruption as possible. The rebellions in Ferguson and Baltimore threatened a carefully constructed agreement between corporate power and the black political class, a deal forged and mediated largely through the structures of the Democratic Party. The black political class lives and feeds within the institutional confines of the Democratic Party, which has colonized most of black communities, civic groups, and churches. For the black elite, the resistance means defense of the Democratic Party against all challengers, indulging the independent political challenges from grassroots black America, which is decidedly to the left of the Democratic Party. Understand what he's saying? There was a bond that was created between the Democratic Party and African Americans, and you can understand why. For the most part, the party extended a hand in this way. But in extending a hand in this way, it's also somewhat colonized all of these areas of African American life. So black churches, preachers, those type of things have intermingled themselves within this kind of political apparatus. There's a reason why blacks vote overwhelmingly Democrat in this way. And it almost is like, goes by forethought, that of course you're going to vote Democrat. Well, if that's a forethought, then that's not necessarily something you need to think about. He's just kind of making this point that African Americans believe that just because these people have their particular race, they're in their best interests. He's making the point that it's not. That ultimately these guys are functionaries of the Democratic Party, and they would use whatever leverage, even if that leverage is their race, to articulate this kind of plan for Democrats. In this case, protecting that party from challenges. The party has lost all throughout the United States. House, Senate, Supreme Court, 66 of 99 state legislatures. They have failed on a massive fucking level. They've lost a certain level of legitimacy. Having this class come out saying, we're the resistance, we're holding back the night, we're the warriors on the wall, all of these things, these guys are just Democratic functionaries. They're no different than the other Democrats. That's the point that he's making. Their allegiance is not necessarily to their race, even though they may use race as leverage. Their allegiance is to protecting the party. The last thing they want are people that were far to the left of that party to invade and take over those spaces in that party. You have these guys come out saying, we're the resistance, we're holding back the night, we're doing this, we're doing that. What are you resisting? And when did you start? And if you're also telling me that you're capitalists, then I have to ask, where does your allegiance lie? Yeah. I agree with you. Let's keep going. The black misleadership class trips me out. In quotes, he has the black elite's job is to keep a lid on black protests. Essentially, I need you guys to quiet down. We're working around the edges. I need you to quiet down. There is this awesome quote by Martin Luther King. It's not a quote, it's a video. Or a thing on YouTube. And Martin Luther King is giving this speech, and he's talking about how he was being heckled, like somebody, heckled Martin Luther King. And he's talking about how, at the end of his day, he's thinking about this, and he's feeling a little pissed off by this whole thing. Because certainly Martin Luther King knows that he's Martin Luther King, and it's like, how dare you heckle me after all the shit that I've been through on behalf of this particular community. As he starts to think about it, though, he kind of made this point of, those kids who heckle me are in a particular context where they feel that they're in a bad place. And being in that bad place, I am telling them things that I'm trying to move things forward and move things along, and I'm working in this political space and all this other stuff. And it's not moving fast enough. They don't see it. They don't see the changes. From their context, they're not wrong to heckle me. He's pissed off, and he should be pissed off because of the conditions that he's living in. I am telling him that I'm trying to get things done, and I'm not getting those things done fast enough. Now, in this context, from the standpoint of Democrats, in the same way that Martin Luther King is making this point of, I am trying to move things along, calm down. And you have the Malcolm X character saying, I need my shit right now. If I don't have it right now, we're willing to go to war. I need it right now. If you give me freedom and equality right now, then fair enough. But if you don't, I need to leave this country. Like, there's this revolutionary thing from one side, and this other side who's saying, look, I'm trying to get things done, calm down, everything else. Here's the catch. Those guys were actually trying to get things done. And Martin Luther King, working in that particular context, was actually trying to get things done. He was actually doing something that was to the benefit of the people who he was working with. Can you honestly say that the people who are being paid all of this cash in Congress, and who can look at the voting record in regards to like Princeton studies and see where those vote tallies end up, do you honestly believe that they're doing what's in your best interest? Do you believe that these guys, just because they're African American, are somehow distinctly suited to work in that interest after being paid large gobs of money? Do you believe that because they're black, because they have a different race, that they have somehow superior integrity, that they can't be bribed just like everyone else is bribed? If you believe the elements of the party is corrupt, then the same thing is hold true for these guys. That's the point. Race doesn't make the difference in this case. Doesn't make the difference at all. Their job is to keep those people from the left out of that party. In this particular context, Glen Ford is looking at it from the standpoint of African Americans. Honestly, you don't have to do that. You can look at it from the context of any leftist trying to invade that party. This context is specific, but the context is less important. They will block any leftist. Now, in this case, he's talking about African Americans, using African Americans to block other African Americans from getting into it and keeping down protests and this kind of revolutionary fervor. But the same thing is true even outside the context of African Americans. If you're talking about just the context of people in general, same thing is true. Same thing is true. Think of the Sanders movement. Think of all those people being, taping their mouths shut because the DNC was trying to shut them up. Think of all these people they just kicked out of the DNC. They were supposed to be Sandinistas. No, I shouldn't use the term Sandinistas, but you know what I mean. People are going to conflate the two. But you know what I mean. You know what I mean. This isn't a race thing. This is yes, they're using race in this context to block out these type of groups saying, hey, we got this under control. We're going to make incremental changes, etc., etc. Focus on the things that we're talking about, not on the things that you actually need done. But it doesn't necessarily, it's not specific to African Americans. That's all I mean. Ferguson thus created a crisis, not just for the ruling order in general, but also for the corporate dependent black misleadership class rooted in the Democratic Party. The first casualties were the Reverend Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, as well as a lesser light of their ilk whose legitimacy as black leaders was rejected by a new cadre of activists. The Democratic National Committee's attempt to absorb Black Lives Matter was also rebuffed, for the time being at least, in the late summer of 2015, when the Black Lives Meter declared, the Democratic Party, like the Republican Party and all political parties, have historically attempted to control and contain black people's efforts to liberate ourselves. True change requires real struggle, and the real struggle will be in the streets and led by the people, not by a political party. That is strong. That is immensely strong. I love that. That is immensely strong. He's essentially saying those two parties, for the most part, are similar. Those two parties are alike, and those two parties, but at the very least, the Democratic Party has tried to absorb us into whatever they are. We're not going to be absorbed in that way. I approve. I approve. Just 2 months before a Ferguson cop gunned down Michael Brown, the Congressional Black Caucus showed its true allegiance when 80% of the members voted against a bill that would have halted Pentagon's transfer of weapons, gear, and training to local police departments. So you understand that a lot of the military equipment that's used abroad and so forth, at some point comes back home, and that military equipment can be used in the different police stations all across the United States. So you end up with this place in Maybury with all of these yahoos that are, at any particular moment, can decide they want to use military equipment on citizens of the United States. And we saw it in Ferguson, by the way. 2 years later, when all of Black America was mourning or enraged or engaged in outraged action over the police murders of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge and Philando Castile in Minnesota, the Congressional Black Caucus tried to change the subject, staging a diversionary sit-down on the floor of the U.S. House demanding gun control, as if they had anything to do with mass police killings of Black people. With the defeat of the corporatist Democrat Hillary Clinton by the overt racist Donald Trump, the Congressional I love the way he writes. With the defeat of the corporatist Democrat Hillary Clinton by the overt racist Donald Trump, the Congressional Black Caucus exited from reality-based politics altogether. Atlanta Congressman John Lewis forgot all about the Republican voter suppression, which had stolen at least 2 presidential elections in this century and surely played a decisive role in Trump's 2016 victory. Instead, the first thing out of Lewis's mouth after the Electoral College verdict was Russians. Russians. And that's all the Black Caucus have talked about ever since. Russians. Now, as an African American, I interact with other African Americans. Go figure. And some of those African Americans happen to be Hillary voters. A lot of them are, just by percentage. And I've had difficult conversations, at least difficult on their end, of asking them why they're voting for Hillary Clinton and what do they believe that the Democratic Party represents and why do they believe the Democratic Party represents their interests. Now, one of the things that will come up is Russia. And in having this conversation, trying to make this point of, you understand that there are 1,000 things wrong with our election system and Russia is the least of those things. Russia. They're reading that book, What Happened? And they're looking for all the reasons why Hillary Clinton lost that election. Now, that being said, he's right. These guys have screamed at the top of their lungs about Russia. Now, but understand why they've screamed about Russia. There's a few reasons for this. Some of them may actually believe that Russia has something to do with Hillary Clinton losing that election. It's very possible. Even if they did, what explains the other 1,000 election seats all throughout the country? You've been losing everything all throughout the country. You're acting as if this is some kind of shock phenomena that you've lost the presidency. You've lost everything throughout the country. 66 out of 99 state legislatures. You've done losing immensely well. You've done losing bigly. Now, so Russia, take that shit off the table. Your problem is your party, man. And the last thing they want to have the conversation with is about the problem is the party. So in order to obfuscate, what needs to take place is the scathing internal look at why we fail so much and what's the problem with the party and all this other stuff. They don't want to have that conversation. At the very least, they don't want to have the conversation in public. They understand the issue. We take a lot of money and we can't represent the positions that we are supposed to represent as the Democratic Party. If a person is going to vote for a Republican, they're going to vote for a Republican, not the person who doesn't necessarily know what the hell they are. So, yes, we are a platypus. We have an internal conflict. We take huge amounts of cash, but the people who tend to vote for us are against the fact that we take huge amounts of cash. We have an internal conflict. Now, you may have somebody who's like Obama who can pass it off very well and pretend as if he's this kind of progressive and talking this rhetoric that's not necessarily as aggressive and all this other stuff. It's this kind of read whatever you want into the language. Hillary Clinton doesn't play that role well. Let's be honest. That's not her forte. it comes across robotic and it comes across somewhat as fake. It makes it a little bit more difficult to wear that mask when everyone knows it's a mask. People wanted something different, man. The Democrats don't want to have that conversation. They don't want to say, we're sorry, we take large amounts of cash. We believe that we need this cash in order to get our people elected. But in order to take this cash, we need to lean in a particular direction. To the right. To the right. This goes to his larger point of part and parcel to why they want to keep these leftists out of the party is because they know these leftists are antagonistic to the cash that they want to take. That's the first point. That point has nothing to do with race. That point has everything to do with they want a certain amount of control over the apparatus, and the last thing they want to do is give it up to people who are further to the left. Russia is an easy obfuscation. Bring up the Red Menace. Russia attacked us. Russia hacked us. Vladimir Putin touched Lady Liberty inappropriately, and now we must go into spending $1 trillion on our war budget. It's fucking insane. Barbara Lee and Maxine Waters, who were among the 8 Black Caucus members that voted to halt the Pentagon's wholesale militarization of local police in 2014, have now made common calls with the rest of the caucus in demanding that Facebook, Google, and other social media gateways censor their pages to prohibit promotion of division and racial animosity and racial hatred. Google was easy to interpret this as a mandate to censor the left. The corporation openly brags that it has altered its algorithms to suppress controversial subject matter, resulting in dramatic declines in visitation on a whole range of left-wing sites, especially those singled out by the Washington Post right after the election as giving aid and comfort to Russia. Black Agenda Report was one of those. The Black Caucus has found its comfort zone in the heat of battle against Russia and China and Venezuela, Cuba, Syria, and everybody else on the imperial hit list. The CBC's motto, my master's enemy is my enemy. Oh, that's brutal. That's brutal. They have taken the meaning of House Negroes to a new level. Having nothing to offer their constituents, the Black Caucus has become the war party's rhythm section, beating the drum of new McCarthyism. I love that. That's brutal, but I love it. On November 4th and 5th, the Black Caucus, or the Black is Back Coalition, will hold its annual conference and march on the White House under the theme of the ballot and the bullet, war and peace in the era of Donald Trump. There is a consensus among the coalition that the ballot can be used in conjunction with the struggles for social and economic justice, Black self-determination, and peace. But the Black leadership class, which includes the vast bulk of Black Democratic office holders, is loyal to nothing but its own class fortunes and personal career. When crunch comes, they change the subject and opt for war. I love Glen Ford's writing. Look, he's making a larger point. If you look at the financial data that came out recently, and you compare African Americans' wealth to that of whites, it is astonishing. It's like 10 times less. Like, it's a mind-blowing thing to look at. And yeah, it's a mind-blowing thing to look at. He's making the point that, yes, you guys are in that office. And yes, as you work and function in the party, for the most part, you're only functioning for yourselves and for people of your particular class. Yes, you use race in the context of getting people to vote for me because I'm Black, I'm in the Democratic Party, and blah, blah, blah. Those are identity politics. Just because someone shares your identity doesn't necessarily mean they actually share your interests. Meaning, you can look like me all you want. Ultimately, are you voting in ways that's going to adversely affect me economically? Are you going to fuck me over economically? If they have a D beside their name, that answer is probably going to be yes. Now, mind you, this doesn't mean that the other party is going to be a no. Yes, the Republican Party is going to be worse. But neither of these parties share your interests. So, that's my opinion on it. I love Glen Ford's writing, and I think he's right. Just because these guys look a particular way doesn't necessarily mean they're towing your agenda. So, when crunch times comes, they change now for war. Think of all the things that assail the public. Now, I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I don't think as a person, if they're running as a politician, you can be overtly for a particular race. I don't think that works. So I don't think as an African-American politician, you can vocally just go balls out saying, you know, I'm only for blacks or whatever. I don't think that flies. But I do think you have a large number of people in this country that are in poverty. That's black, that's white, that's Hispanic, that's all around. That's just a person thing. If you have 50% of the country in poverty, we only make up 13% of the public. Even if you lumped all of us in, there's a lot of other people who are in that. I don't think it needs to be that specific to African Americans. That's what I'm getting at. A politician who's in that office and is representing a particular interest economically, it would help everybody. That's all I'm saying. It would be a broad stroke that would sweep across the country in that way. It wouldn't necessarily be targeted at any particular demographic. Now, you could make legislation targeting a demographic. I personally am not necessarily against reparations. I just don't think that you have any chance of getting them. I don't think people in this country regard their history honestly in regards to the chaos and havoc that it causes. I don't even think it regards its recent history honestly in regards to the chaos it causes across the world. So no, I don't think that's going to take place. But if it was something that was sweeping that affected a large swath of society, yes, I do think you could get that done. Are the Democrats doing it? No. Do they talk about issues that's going to adversely affect this large swath of society? No. They're not going to have the conversation about automation. They're not going to have a conversation about shipping those jobs overseas with these trade deals. None of that stuff is on the table. None of the stuff about the climate change or anything else, for the most part, is on the table. They talk about this stuff in abstract terms without necessarily putting brass tacks on the table. So, all right, I'm burning my mouth. Let's see. Terry, I get it, but these people are still human, and in a sense, they're still victims of our past and our system. We need to appeal to them through empathy, in my honest opinion. There's nothing wrong with appealing to people with empathy. I agree. What does the Russians have to do with our past? I have no idea. Where's Glen for clickbait much? I don't know. We're doing that one. Oh, no. You misunderstood me. I didn't mean it that way. I meant this is Glen Ford's article. Yeah, you misunderstood me. That's my bad. Is Glen Ford appearing on the show? Is Jamal referring to the article? I'm referring to the article, Chris. My audio is not way low. At least I don't think it is. Unless it changed over the course of... Damn, you're absolutely right. They're marching against BDS, Palestine. Yeah. Bit Rasputin. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. They're marching against BDS. You know, they were talking about a bill that would have criminalized the BDS movement. It's amazing. I mean, you had some of these guys who were supporting this garbage. Black corporatists are just as useless to the common person as white corporatists. Those things are the same. Those things are the same. Just because somebody, like this argument over Donald Trump and his behavior is fucking amazing to me. And these guys are, we're resisting. We're the resistance. We're going to resist Donald Trump. Okay. You're going to resist Donald Trump. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. Donald Trump is just pushing regular Republican policy. He may be gross and over the top, but ultimately this is just Republican policy. You're not resisting the wars because the last president was there. You didn't create this resistance during the last president. You're not resisting them kicking all these Hispanics out of the country when the last president was doing it. So it's the issue that he's gross when he does it. Like, he's an overt racist, as Glen Ford said. So that's bad because he's an overt racist when he does it. But if you do it and you're not a racist, then it makes it okay. This is an insane conversation to me about this stuff, this resistance garbage. It sounds nonsense to me. First of all, it has a lot to do with our past, but it's not the part of the past I was talking about. Yeah, Terry, I need you to be more specific on that one. Let's see. Too many acronyms. I can't remember. Guess they were Google's no help. If Malcolm X or Martin Luther King was alive, they would call this Russia story BS. Yes, they would call this Russia story BS. Yeah, they would. like, Martin Luther King is an amazing fucking figure. So people think about him in this kind of peacenik context. Like, you know, this guy was a dreamer. He had a dream and all this other stuff. If you ever listen to his speeches, if you ever get the opportunity to listen to some of the stuff he's talking about on on YouTube, speeches are amazing. Speeches are amazing. The speech where he came out against the Vietnam War, and this is in the backdrop of, what, the 60s. Now, he's in hostile territory at every moment because he's Martin Luther King. Everybody knows who he is. He's been speaking out. It's like, how dare this Negro speak to us in this manner? But he's shaming them with this kind of moral clarity of what you're doing is absolutely wrong, and it is overtly apparent that this is wrong. This can't go on in this way. Now, when he starts making inroads with the Democratic Party, talking about LBJ, or even John F. Kennedy, you can even start with Kennedy. Kennedy came to the jail. He starts making inroads with the Democratic Party. And LBJ is bombing Vietnam, bombing it to smithereens. And Martin Luther King comes out with his speech condemning the Vietnam War, making this point of, you're spending all of this money on the Vietnam War when you can't take care of the people who are in your own country. He's like condemnatory at this war. And LBJ is like, what is this Negro? How dare this Negro come out against me? Mind you, when the overture was already being made to Martin Luther King. If I'm not mistaken, LBJ pulled his security after Martin Luther King did that. He is in hostile territory. There's a ballsiness about this, meaning he's looking at this and saying, the imperialism abroad affects us here. Those things aren't separate and distinct from one another. He was making a link and a tie between those things, speaking about it. Yeah, he'd call it BS. He'd call it BS. And it is BS. Even in The Hill, when The Hill reported that story, they couldn't necessarily create a link between Trump and Russia. They wouldn't even add it to the story itself, even though The Hill is an establishment article. The most they would say is the alleged connection between Trump and Russia. So yes. Yes. They should be upset about Clinton's actual Russian dealings. Bob Ramirez. So yes, they should. They should. If they're gonna bitch about Russia, then yes, they should definitely bitch about that. Glen Ford would ask, where was the resistance against Obama? Yes, Glen Ford would ask that. I would ask the same thing. I'd ask the same thing. Cheryl Vick. That is when people backing him turned against him. Okay, I don't know the top part of that one. They can have a Bush or a Clinton, or there's hell to pay. It's in the Constitution. 2-Bit Rasputin. Did you hear George Bush's speech? They're trying to rehabilitate that war criminal. That war criminal invaded the country, killed 1 million people, and he's out here giving speeches, wagging his finger at Donald Trump. I find that to be amazing. The military policy that we have right now, for the most part, started under George Bush. Obama took over that particular military policy and refined it and made it better, meaning in terms of better at killing, and turned it over to Trump. It seems that George Bush's issue here is that Trump is an overt racist, not the fact that he's killing all these people abroad or whatever else. None of that's on the table. I'm amazed that the guy who was torturing people, trying to create a link between 9/11, torture is against the law, by the way, so is invading another country under false pretense. Both of those things are against the law. He's up there giving speeches. He's out there finger painting, selling his books. I find this to be amazing that they're trying to rehabilitate this guy purely as a way of attacking Trump. It's fucking amazing. The guy who murdered 1 million people was a goddamn war criminal. We've been in those countries for 16 years. We've been in those countries 16 years. You want to know what patriotism is? Not allowing those people to go to war for stupid fucking reasons. That's what being a patriot is. The idea that George Bush, and I'm way on a tangent, I don't like George Bush. George Bush in that speech mentioning the governing class. People are turning away from the governing class. What the hell is a governing class? What the hell is a governing class? I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I have an idea of what he thinks it is. I have an idea of what he thinks it is. It would be interesting to me to hear the perspective of the public, hearing their politicians talk about the governing class, particularly the asshole that got 1 million people murdered. He is fortunate that somebody like me didn't take the presidency, because I would have locked his ass in prison. I would have put his ass in prison day one of office. Kathleen Cohn, I know it's gross seeing Bush boy moralizing to Trump as if he's a better person. That's laughable. Yes. 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 That's my point. Yes. Shirley Vick. Benjamin Dixon says the Hill is anti-Hillary and I had to stop listening to him. Bush should be in jail and Obama. Benjamin Dixon says the Hill is anti-Hillary. The Hill is not anti-Hillary. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. The Hill is just... It's just The Hill. It's a magazine. It's a political magazine. I've seen no anti-Hillary bias in The Hill. I've seen no anti-Hillary bias in The Hill. Rob, Illinois. Jamal, you need to give over this Eugene V. Debs economic ideology, all about manufacturing jobs. There are way more jobs serving humanity and public service. I agree with you on that. And look, I'm not on this thing about jobs. I don't know if you've heard my videos on this whole idea of freedom, but my concept of freedom is not human beings doing stupid fucking labor. If there's a job that can be automated, the job should be automated. Full stop, period. Now, the question always comes up, who's going to, how are people going to work? It's the wrong question. Your society, look, your society is beyond the point of needing human labor for most jobs. Ultimately, you can have automation do the majority of the jobs that are in your country. And if you want, as your society grows and evolves, you can have more and more things being automated, meaning as you get more technically precise, you have more jobs automated. That doesn't necessarily mean that every job is going to get rid of. It's not going to work that way. But I don't want people driving a car if they don't have to drive a car. I don't want people being fry cooks if they don't have to be fry cooks. I don't want people in Starbucks if I don't have to see people in Starbucks. Anything that can be automated should be automated. Let those people go fish. Let those people, whatever. I don't care what they do. I don't care what they do. Yes, you're going to have some labor in a society. But those things don't necessarily have to be in the way that we have ourselves arranged at this point. Your technology can essentially handle most of the needs of your society. Well, because think of it from the standpoint of somebody who makes shoes or t-shirts or plants. How many t-shirts can a plant make in an hour? You're talking about thousands. How about pants? Thousands. Tennis shoes? Thousands. You've gotten to the point where you have so much stuff that you need advertisement to get people to convince people to buy more shit than they actually need. You're post-scarcity. You're post-scarcity. Any war that you're having over resources and everything else is somewhat contrived. Your issue is not the resources. Your issue is how to distribute them to people in a way that those people can use them. No, Rob, I don't have this fixation on jobs. I don't have the fixation on jobs. Further to the left than that. What happened to Ben Dixon? I have no idea. What the heck is wrong with Benjamin Dixon? I have no idea. I don't think anything is wrong with Benjamin Dixon. I don't know the guy, so I can't answer that question. Terry J 123. There should, but there is no way to legally prove a quid pro quo when it comes to Clintons and the uranium one thing. The most that we could do is have it affect them, and it did. It greatly added to her loss. Oh, I see what you mean. You're saying there's no way to say that this particular deal was done just purely because somebody gave them money to do that particular deal. That's fair. That's fair. But come on. Come on. Pretend for the moment that the Clintons do not have the superhuman level of integrity. Pretend for the moment they're not Superman. Superman, have women throwing themselves at him all the time, and Superman says, no, I'm married and I'm going back to my wife. Save the day. I'm trying to just make this point that most people, for the most part, are just people. They're fuck-ups. They do things. They go into ways that are in their self-interest. They do things that are not necessarily always to the right. And even when they think they're being fair and they're being honest, there's an aspect of them that knows the truth. That their decision, in some way, it's in their brain somewhere that XYZ is going to be adversely affected if they do make a certain choice. Say for the moment that this is just somebody else. It's not Hillary Clinton. It's not Bill Clinton. And you come home one day and say, by the way, honey, these guys are giving me $500,000 to do a speech. Are you completely unaware that the person who's giving me that money for the speech is also in front of you, meaning a decision is going to be made that's going to affect that particular company that's giving your husband a speech? Now, you're having this conversation at the kitchen table, and your husband has just told you that this particular company is going to give him $500,000 for him to speak. I don't know what Bill Clinton is saying that's worth $500,000, but whatever. They're giving him $500,000 to speak. This seems to me like a bribe. Now, it seems to me like a bribe because it's not that much different than somebody just giving Bill Clinton a check for $500,000. What's the difference? I know you're bringing in the idea of a speech. Say the speech is 10 minutes long. Bill Clinton giving a speech for 10 minutes long. I know it's longer than that. I'm just kind of making a point. And getting $500,000 for giving that speech. They could have said, Bill Clinton, we would like you to press the elevator door for us, and we're going to give you $500,000 to do it. I can think of any number of trivial things that you could have asked Bill Clinton to do and given him a check for $500,000. The speech is a pretext. It's just there purely for the sake of a fig leaf. You can call me cynical, but that's how I see this. And then you turn around and the Clinton Foundation gets over $2 million afterwards. Come on, man. Come on. Is that the company giving them a thank you? Hey, maybe next time we will do business, if you do right by us, you will also get additional cash in your wallet for doing right by us. We can give Bill Clinton another speech. Hell, we can give him $1 million in this speech. We can give Clinton a speech. We can give Chelsea a speech. We can give the dog a speech. The speech is just what's there. It's just the thing, the medium of exchange. We need to make this not look like a bribe. Okay, let's say you just give us a speech. Let's say in that speech you just say nursery rhymes for 60 minutes. It's just there for the sake of there, man. I'm far more cynical in thinking that these guys have this uber and super level of integrity, and that the money that they're getting is somehow completely separate and distinct from the things that she was doing in that office. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Call me anti-Hillary all you want. That looks immensely bad. If that was Donald Trump, and Donald Trump had gotten all that money for doing a nuclear deal, people would be screaming to take his head off. That's the truth. Terry J123. Jamal, I fully agree with you. They knew what they were doing and did it anyway. Hubris, but there's no way to legally prove quid pro quo. It still come back to bite them in the ass. Okay, fair enough. I don't know the legal distinction. That's fair. That's fair. It looks immensely bad. Anybody else, any rational human being will look at that and say that's a quid pro quo. But legality is different. You're right. You're right. You're totally right. They massaged the numbers. If you didn't notice, they didn't put it into the real numbers or vaguely interpreted numbers. That's Rob. Dave McCall. We all prosper by selling rocks to each other. What? What? 2-Bit Rasputin. Deep State is taking back the Clinton Foundation's fortune. You don't think they'll let Chelsea keep it? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that one. Let's see what the Bob Ramirez say. I think they're having a battle here. Catherine Horace. The law defines it as thus: a public official nor any first-degree relative may profit in that way. It is a crime by definition. You don't have to prove it. You know, what's his name? There's another Democrat that's being taken to court over this idea of you profited from what took place, meaning you got cash and you did all this other stuff and it was a quid pro quo. Now, the people couldn't directly prove quid pro quo. They can only make this point of saying you did things that was in the interest of the people who gave you that cash. It's an interesting case. He tried to get the case dismissed and couldn't get the case dismissed. So he's going to court over that. So we'll see. All right, Dave McCall. Uh-oh, he's going to take me down the peg. What garbage you got today, Jamal? Not everyone can have the rich life. Ask Obama. If every breeding third world peep get their cars and their air conditioning, it's all over. This is why I like conservatives, man. Leftists like to dismiss. Sometimes they say shit that's fascinating and that's true. So, now granted, they say it in ways that are somewhat crass. So for leftists and lefties, and you know, it hurts our ears. So we kind of rebuff the language. But sometimes what they're saying is true. If every breeding thoroughbred peeps get their car and the air conditioning, it's over. Is that true or not? Now, if you're talking about the confines of a capitalistic system, then yes. If you're talking about a system where you're actually looking to make sure that the goal is to meet human need, the answer is no. It depends on the system that you're wrapping yourself in. I think they will want more than air conditioning. I think food will probably be first. I would imagine somewhere to stay would be next. I would imagine having something to do that's fruitful would also be next. I don't think as a human being that's too much to ask for. I mean, if you're going to bring a human being to the planet, at the very least you should be able to take care of the human being that's being brought to the planet. And I don't think that's purely the responsibility of the family. I think that's the responsibility of the society itself. All of us. It's one planet. We might carve ourselves into these countries and everything else, but ultimately it's one planet. If the United States is building a huge number of war factories and polluting the rest of the planet, then it doesn't necessarily matter that one of the other countries abroad may have this nice, decent environmental policy if we're wrecking the planet on our side. It's one world. It's one world. Yes, I want to give air conditioning to all those peeps. We have things in excess. I was reading a report today saying how much food that's being wasted in Western countries. More than enough. It's surplus. Ultimately, you're trying to sell stuff to people who already have too much. You convince them by this, in this kind of societal space of saying buying more, as more has something to do with the study of status. That's advertising. That's just culture. That's not real. That's shit that's programming of sorts. But people buy into it. They start to buy more and more and more and more. I have a house full of shit that I don't want. I have a house full of shit I don't need. Every other day, Miss Thomas is getting something from Amazon that she doesn't need. That's coming into the house and you're like, why are you buying it? Why are you buying it? It was cute. It was cute. It was adorable. I can use it for this very specific thing that I have something else that I already use. You know, we've turned buying into this cultural phenomena as opposed to just meeting the needs of the people in our society and our world. Yes, the people in the third world can have an air conditioner. They can have a decent living standard. The entire world can have a decent living standard. And you can do it in a way that doesn't necessarily destroy the planet. Not in a capitalistic way, no. Capitalism is too wasteful to do it. No, it can't meet those needs. Doesn't even try. Doesn't even try. I would argue that the world you have today is a representation of what the capitalistic model provides. Thomas C. There's no reason we can't all orbit Earth. Agreed. Zocox. But it's legal to put lead into your water and charge you for the full price, and you're not drinking. It has nothing to do with us. Pay or we'll take your house. Yeah. Look, man, it depends on what kind of government you want. I had a friend of mine. We were having this argument about energy. And like in a sense of, I was making this point that energy markets should be nationalized. It should be, just as a flat fact. I'd argue they should be nationalized if we're talking about this thing of human survival. And he's like, whoa, man, that's giving way too much power to the government. And I was trying to make this point to him. You understand that the owners of that oil company is like top 1%. Okay. But you're okay with private ownership of the energy production of this country, even though you yourself would say that the energy production in this country is destroying this world. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't follow. There's a private interest in regards to these guys in making as much profit as possible. Pursuant to making as much profit as possible, they're going to pollute because for them, it's expensive not to. So they're running their production, whatever that production is. They're not going to stop the production. They don't want there to be any kind of alternative energy production because it's going to take away from their business. They're going to do what they need to do to keep that business ticking along in the way that business has been ticking along. Meaning, fuck your environmental policy. That's what that means. That's what that means. That means all of these environmental groups who are out there protesting and everything else, ultimately your issue It's the model itself. They have a vested interest in putting those pipelines down. They have a vested interest in trying to get oil from the Arctic. They have a vested interest in taking your land away from you and putting pipelines on your particular property. It makes them profit. People are going to do what's profitable to those people within this particular game space. That's the rules of the game space itself. That's not necessarily because they're horrible, bad people. They're following the programming. Look, your world can be different. Your world could be fundamentally different. There's nothing stopping your world from being fundamentally different. Okay, that's wrong. There is. I'm saying there's nothing cosmically stopping it. There's no God above or hell below that's stopping your world from being a particular way. People arrange themselves in a way they arrange themselves. It can be changed. It's a matter of perspective. That perspective can shift. Don't ask me how. Do not ask me how. How did the surplus food lab, oil and mining? Well, I would make the point that you can supply the world's energy needs without oil and mining. That's the first point. And I know oil production there's a lot of products being made with oil and everything else. But you're assuming the current pretext exists forever. It's almost as if you can't break your mind away from this idea of this capitalistic game space. Your world is falling the fuck apart. You understand that, right? This is not, it's easy to turn around and say, oh, I don't believe in scientists. I have no idea what that means. If you're making this point that climate change is not real, I don't know what you're using for that. That's magical thinking to me. Ultimately, the people who analyze our particular world, this is not this kind of new age thinking where we're having this conversation about OBs and everything else. Physical matter reality. Physical matter reality. The things that we're doing on this planet is taking a toll on this particular planet, and we're killing our living space. Now, that's not me saying it. That's the prevailing scientific opinion and prevailing scientific wisdom by people who are actually doing experiments and looking at the data. If you're not doing experiments, if you're not looking at data, I don't know what you're using to make your opinion on this. Your world is falling apart. Now, what are you going to do about your world falling apart? Are you going to just let it fall apart and you're going to hit the rock? Or are you going to take substantive actions to try to fix it? At the very least, this idea of energy production, your energy can be produced in other means other than oil and gas. You have a fiscal incentive not to do those things. There's a difference in those things. You're in a game space. This shit isn't real. Like, it's hard to get across this idea of people arguing with this point of as if their capitalistic model is somehow a real thing. It's not real. I'm sorry, it's not. You can't eat your dollars. You can't use your dollars to build your house. If things fell apart, ultimately that money would be worthless. The thing that gives that money value is just a perspective. That's it. It can change. It can change. Oil production, energy production, all those things needs to be changed. It needs to be changed. If you're rich or white enough, you get socialism. Norway, enclaves in suburbia, and the Mormons. Norwegians jailed their bankers. So did Iceland. My wife and I got married in Iceland. They put their bankers in prison. Put them in prison. Civil disobedience. I wonder what the carbon footprint on a block of hash is. Who the hell knows? Who the hell knows? Kathleen Cohen. Jamal, do you think infighting among indie media and progressives has to do with blacks having more on the line in regards to Trump being upset with us not being for anti-Trump? Tim Black, for example. Yeah, I haven't watched Tim Black show in a while. I don't know what he's been talking about. But do you think the infighting among indie media and progressives has to do with blacks having more on the line in regards to Trump being upset for not being anti-Trump? I think I know what you're asking. I think you're asking this question of having a racist in the office. It comes across with this idea of him being hostile or antagonistic towards other demographics. That's the first point. And the second point has to do with the policies that Republicans push. That they may want to just say, these are right-wing policies, but those right-wing policies cut in a particular direction. And that particular direction tends to be antagonistic towards communities of color. That's the second point. I think it's twofold. So In the first case, African Americans have been, I don't want to say brainwashed, but ultimately this thing of Democrats and blacks is real. It's real. It's like this thing of I don't even know who's on the ballot, I vote Democrat. Period. Like that's the way, that's the thinking, that's the mentality of it. So trying to wean people from that is not the easiest thing in the world to do. It's enmeshed in them. It's almost like a cultural memory of sorts. As far back as I can remember, that was essentially the strategy that blacks took when they voted. You may have some, forward thinkers, but the overwhelming majority that I ran into voted that way. The majority that I run into now voted that particular way. Hillary Clinton voters, and some of them think I am absolutely insane. And yet, when I pose my questions, they're forced to answer a particular way. Either they don't know the answer to my question, or they hate the fact that I'm asking those particular questions. Because, look, if you're telling me that you're voting for the party, I need to understand what you believe you're voting for. And ultimately, it boils down to keep the evil, bad people out of office. That's the black vote. This resistance shit and everything else, ultimately, what that 90% vote boils down to is those people in that other office are bad people. Keep them out that office. They're antagonistic towards me and my own. Keep them out that office. I need to keep those people out the office. I keep those other people out the office about voting Democrat. Don't tell me about somebody else. I need to keep them out the office first. That's my first priority. That is not an easy thing to wean people away from, particularly when you believe that who's coming is going to be hostile towards you. Your being, not just because, your person, but who you are, your particular community itself. That's not an easy thing to get past. I don't think people are crazy for thinking that way. I thought that way even in regards to Trump. I voted for Joe Stein because ultimately I couldn't get over this hedge of, the logic didn't make sense to me. I didn't see a way around the logic. What I mean by that is, you have somebody in the party cheats a particular candidate, and then you vote for that person. And if they cheat your candidate again, are you supposed to vote for the person again? At which point do you actually get an actual representative government if you can always cheat the other person's candidate and get a vote just purely because of how terrified you are of the other person? That would be a door that one would have to walk through regardless. It's like the agents in a game. You got to get over that hurdle. What they don't realize, at least what I don't think they realize, I could be wrong, is that you win nothing without leverage. Like, if you're voting at a level of 80 and 90% for any particular party, your vote is taken as a granted. Nothing has been done for you. Nobody has even looked your way. They give you this faint thing of Hillary Clinton sitting with Mary J. Blige. Oh, that's awesome. She sat with Mary J. Blige. She understands us. Because she sat with Mary J. Blige. No, it's fucking insane. Your vote is taken for granted. All of these people who are, in this camp of needing to vote for Hillary or the Democrat, everything else, your vote is taken for granted. You scare the shit out the party, you get a better party. Your leverage is to not vote. At least not for them. That's your leverage. Giving your leverage away by giving your vote away is a waste of a vote. It's almost no different than you just not voting at all. Yes, there's a slight difference, of course, because you're putting your vote for a candidate. I'm just making this point that your leverage evaporates when your vote is just given as a known. You should be willing, as a group, as a demographic, be it leftist, be it African American, be it however you want to associate yourself, but if you're talking about being in a camp in the left, to let them lose. You have to be willing to let them lose. If you're so terrified, of dad coming home with the switch, that your behavior is completely complicit, meaning you're being completely controlled purely because you're terrified of somebody else, you're still being completely controlled. What do you want to take place? What do you want to take place? And do you honestly believe that those things can take place in the current degree of politics that we have right now in regards to the Democratic Party? Any change that takes place comes from the left. You don't have a leftist party with regards to the Democratic Party. Unless that party fundamentally understands that it can lose if it doesn't toe a particular line, then your vote is wasted. I would imagine some African Americans hasn't gotten to that point. Then they would probably think I'm wrong on it, but it's true. It's true. Yes, there's a real reality of Republicans getting in office, but there's also a real reality of Democrats getting in office and behaving in almost the same ways. If you need a leftist party, goddamn it, be a leftist party. Break the Democratic Party until they come to your side of thinking. That's my thought. Other African Americans may not be there, but that's where I am. Pandering to this black community through use of celebrities is absurd. Yes and no. Let's go. No. Yes and no. I would have said you were right a while ago. But spectacle matters. Spectacle matters. Like, so, you and I get into an argument. And you have a bunch of people around as we get into this argument. And you are perfectly and factually correct in the things that you said, and all those people walked away thinking that you lost that argument. A lot of it has to do with how the public is perceiving what is taking place. John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon have a debate. And as they have the debate, Richard Nixon is sweating. He has beads of sweat popping from him. The public looking at this said to themselves, John F. Kennedy wiped the floor with Richard Nixon. The people listening on the radio said Richard Nixon wiped the floor with John F. Kennedy. The perception of it changed things. How it looks matters. It's not just a matter of being right in regards to policy, or being right in regards to what you're trying to accomplish. It's also being able to galvanize a certain look of it, a perception or aura around it. You need optics. Now, pandering to black celebs, yeah, that's at the low end of optics. That's true. She was like, I'm going to get at least 80% of the vote anyway, so I don't really have to do anything. So yes, I'm gracing them with my presence by talking to Mary J. Blige. It's not about race, man. Like, I know, I'm reading the Black Agenda report, the Glen thing, and all this other stuff. It's not about race. We have an immensely complex history in regards to this country with regards to race. That is immensely fair. That's immensely true. But what it boils down to, brass tacks, it's just people. That's it. Meaning, the African American that goes home, that kisses his wife and hugs his kids and eats his Cheerios and plays his Xbox is the same person as the white guy who goes to his house and eats his Cheerios and etc. That white guy may have more resources, that's true, but if we're talking about just a human being, just on a fundamental level, the things that that person wants, the things that that person aspires to, the things that that mom wants when looking at that kid, meaning wants the best for that particular child, is for the most part the same all around. People are people. That's what it boils down to. Now, we've created this game space that allows some people to be immensely advantaged over others and allows certain people to be used by others. All that's true. All that has a certain history to it that sticks to itself, that we work ourselves through. That's also true. But anything that you're talking about get done is talking about getting done on a global level. We're not talking about this thing of the specifics of race at this point. We're talking about people as a whole. Now, I don't know how you get to this thing of evolved human beings that just kind of leave this stuff behind. Because I got to be honest, even I don't know if it's built into our psyche to recognize difference or what, but I would imagine everybody to some degree has this idea of difference. I think, or this perception of difference. And I think even the best of us sometimes fundamentally misunderstand that the person who they're interacting with is just them. Yes, there's a psyche in there that's slightly different, but ultimately, just as a human being, they're the same. They're the same. The changes that you need to make in your country need to be made totally throughout the country itself. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think, look, I think most of these things boil down to class, not race. That's all. That's the point I'm trying to get at. Your distinctions melt away when you start having these issues of class. You're never going to understand somebody's identity. You're not. You're not. You may try, you may be empathetic towards it, but fundamentally understanding from a flesh to bone way that person's identity, it's not going to happen. But it doesn't need to happen. The way that these parties aggregate people towards this thing of identity is a mistake. It's done to obfuscate from the issues of economics or from class struggle. The issue is class, not race. Issue is class. I'll never forget Deborah Walsman Schultz talking about preventing grassroots. Yeah, I know. That was wow. There's a thing where she was making this point that superdelegates are there to keep the grassroots out. Yeah, very true. I've heard stories. Let's see. Homeland Security runs our elections now. We're screwed. That's civil disobedience. Trudy. Dax Jacobson. Which, quote unquote, they. Buster Peak 21. I hope Justice Democrats challenge. Come on. I hope Justice Democrats challenge results and all for audits. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Whoever's running against the parties, I don't care who it is. I want them to smash that party apparatus. Whether it's Greens, whether it's Justice Democrat, I don't care who it is. Smash the party apparatus. That's the first thing. And yes, they should challenge each election result with an audit. I agree. I absolutely agree. Hands down. Kathleen Cohn, right. To me, our challenge right now is globalism versus nationalism. And my concern is not allowing the democratic criminal class getting power again without challenge and destroying the rest of the world. Globalism versus nationalism. Yes and no. Yes and no. All right, so yeah, that's true. Both of those things are challenged. Look, the globalism thing, our naming, man, is too slippery. I don't think people will have issue with globalism if they could, you know, fuck off for doing something. Like, so say for instance, if people weren't getting screwed in the globalism thing, meaning globalism doesn't necessarily mean your jobs being shipped overseas, those products being imported and sold to the United States at a cheaper rate because they can pay this guy a cheaper amount, and those people getting fired at the American factories. If globalism didn't mean that, I don't think people would have issue with this idea of global trade. That's the first point. Part of this has to do with the way we name it. We try to name it, or they try to name it, in these innocuous terms like globalism. Hey, don't you want to have this kumbaya with the rest of the world? Yes, I do. But no, I don't necessarily want it to be exploitive, particularly when we're talking about the working class. Your issue is not the trade deal itself. Your issue is how they're writing those trade deals. You can interact with these other countries in a way that doesn't necessarily exploit your workforce or their workforce. You can have all the globalism you want. The way is how you're trying to have that globalism. The nationalism is a little bit more disconcerting to me. But the nationalism is just a response to the globalism. Like, people perceive globalism as being purely this kind of exploitation of a particular country by some other country. You know, this corporate class selling out the working class in that way. And they create this kind of nationalistic fervor as kind of a push against the global elements of society, where they perceive as being this kind of externalizing of our country. In one capacity, you have this kind of meeting of the minds on the left and the right on this, particularly when you're talking about these trade deals. NAFTA, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the other stuff they have in abroad, like TTIP and all this other stuff, these banking regulations. Most of these things aren't trade deals. Most of these things are just regulations that deal with, like, sewing up world trade order in that way. So you would have the Trans-Pacific Partnership that would allow a grand tribunal of lawyers to make determinations on United States policy. We essentially abdicate our responsibility to the citizenry of the country to some foreign tribunal. It's amazing, some of the stuff that they were writing in these things. Nationalism seems to be pushed back against that. It seems to be pushed back. At least that's what I think it is. Shirley Vick, China will soon be an empire. Will be manufacturing like crazy over something that should be done over here. But you understand, this is systemic. This is not look, I know we may bring up Hillary Clinton or Obama or Trump or Bush or whatever as bad actors, and some of them are bad actors. But understand that what we're talking about is a systemic way of behavior. Like, so you have a company, that company makes widgets. That company wants to make as many widgets as it possibly can for the cost that it can, the most cost-effective way that it can get it. Meaning the least expensive product it can make for the most amount of profit. Now, part of this means it needs to hire staff and needs to get the products themselves. Now, you've told this company that its job is to maximize its profit in a way that it can maximize its profit. If this company finds that there's a factory in China that can make 1,000 widgets in 2 minutes, then this company has no reason to stay in the United States. And this company is going to fire its 1,000 workers, and it's going to put its plant in China where it has 2 or 3 workers, and it's going to pay them half the amount that it was paying the United States workers. It's going to ship those products over from that country into this country with little to no tariff. And it's going to sell those products in Walmart and some other stores. The factory or the company that was making those widgets, it's doing what it's supposed to do. The system itself told it to maximize its profit, and if hey, I can maximize my profit doing this, so this is what I'm going to do. The social impact of doing that doesn't matter. Say you have the exact same company. Say the company says, oh man, I don't want to move all the way to China. The company interacts with China and it buys that particular product that allows that company to make those widgets that fast in that short of time. And it installs that machine in the United States and it fires 95% of its workforce. It makes as many widgets as it was making beforehand in half the time. Now, it's not going to let those people work less or anything else. It's going to work the same amount. But that company is going to maximize and pull that profit to the top. But again, the company is supposed to do that. Social impact doesn't necessarily factor into the behavior of the company itself. But why should it? Why should it? We glorify wealth. The most that money can make or most that a company can make, we don't give a shit how it made the profits. We just say, oh my God, that company made all that profit. They're emeritus. If that guy has $40 billion, that guy has done something to deserve $40 billion. And that's where we tick along. That guy who has $40 billion in the bank can step over a guy who's homeless to get into his car. And people would think that that would be perfectly okay. I'm amazed by that, but people would think that would be perfectly okay. It's our system. Our system creates a certain behavior. I'll say it that way. It pushes a certain behavior. Civil disobedience. I agree. It's an avenue, even necessary. I'm just too distrustful of the DNC. Me too. Buster Peak 21. I don't consider Justice Democrats. I consider them policy-oriented people that are using the democratic structure to employ those policies. Yes, that's a good point. Jenny Lynn. Hey Jamal. Hey sexy revolutionaries. Aw. How you doing, Jenny Lynn? Yeah, I've heard that argument about the DNC. I've heard Justice Democrats make that case. And I've heard brand new Congress make that case. We're not Democrats. We're just using the apparatus, etc., etc., etc. I would say, vote for the specific candidates that you believe are going to represent your interests. That's what I would say. Obama said, if you think about all the youth and everybody that mentioned here in Africa, if everybody is raising living standards, got a car air conditioner, the planet will boil over. David McCall. Yes, you're right. Based on, like, as wasteful as we are with things, that's true. That's true. But do you need to be that wasteful with things? That's what I'm getting at. All of this, the pretext for all of this, is that this capitalistic system stays the way it is. And we try to expand the shittiness that we have here into other countries all around the globe. We would need 9 planets to pull that off. It is physically impossible to keep your wasteful system the way you have now and expand it to everybody else. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to keep this particular system in your expansion. That's my point. That's my point. How much carnage and violence are you willing to accept to maintain the system that you currently have? That's your question. If I am having this conversation about a different system that tries to get rid of poverty and war and all this other stuff, it's being compared against the system that we have now. This system is falling off of a cliff. Your planet, your world is on fire. You have your habitat is collapsing around you. Flat fact. Flat fact. That's not me being inflammatory. Any random scientist that you get, at least 90-something% will come here and say the exact same thing. Yes, your planet is collapsing around you. You keeping your system ticking along, your system is going to fall apart on its own merits. I'm saying it needs to change. That's all. The answer to money in politics is more money in politics. CYT. Bob Ramirez. 90% inherited tax. Trudy. FDR tried to get it to what, 99%? Or to 100%, it dropped it to 99%. Or 100% over a particular amount. Yeah. That doesn't solve your issue of climate and all this other stuff, but it'll be a start. Get rid of poverty. Garnome, exactly, Bob. I don't understand how people can't see what they're doing. Buster Peak, I'll support anyone who's truly trying to get progressive policies enacted. I don't care what party they're affiliated with. Fair point. Reference to Justice Democrats. Dax Jacobson, Americans won't give up anything to save people outside of the nation. Agreed. 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 It kills me, but agreed. They want to believe in Santa Claus. Bob Ramirez, Trudy, yeah, it takes the oligarchy's power. It's not just that. People are bribed to some degree. Like, you go to your job, you play your Xbox, you eat your Cheerios. You need to have a paycheck because you understand that that paycheck keeps your kid intact, it keeps you intact, and it keeps your living standards up intact. And the last thing you want is to go without. Certainly, people understand what's taking place around the globe. They understand to some degree our impact. They don't want to get involved because they don't want it to adversely affect them. It's sad, but it's true. Sad, but it's true. If we called the 90% inheritance tax an anti-Paris Hilton tax, it would have 80% approval. Civil disobedience. I don't know if it works that way, but okay. Look, the tax thing, I think you need to fundamentally reorganize your society. I think even if you had that tax, you're still hitting a cliff. Your society has not fundamentally changed in the way it does energy production, the way it does anything. Now, maybe you can say you can take the tax money and use it to fund something. Fair enough, but I think your society needs to change. Rob Illinois, Jamal, can you interview this guy named Mike Norman? He's running for president and his platform will blow your mind. I will try to find Mike Norman and see what he's about. Alright guys, I'm going to end this. I am getting tired. My batteries are rolling down. Wait, David McCall, you're not willing to share third world misery. Nobody who is sane is willing. That would be nuts. But nobody's saying that. You're setting up a false pretext. Pretext is wrong. I'm not saying making anybody miserable. I'm saying reorganizing your society in a way that deals with meeting human needs. That's what I'm saying. I don't think you can do that under a capitalistic model. I agree with you that you can't do it with a capitalistic model. Capitalism is not meant to meet all the needs of humanity in this way. It's meant to maximize profit. It's like any other tool. It's a tool to maximize profit. They got better at using that particular tool to maximize their profits. But meeting human need doesn't apply in that way. There's not a buck to be made off of getting rid of suffering and misery. Let's call it encouraging the privileged to work tax. Darn, Jamal can't reorganize as long as money is inherited. I do think, look, it depends. Is the state apparatus still intact where it can be used by the citizenry to affect change? That's the first question. If that answer is yes, then you start from there. If the answer is no, then you're in fuckery. Like at that point, you're talking about something that's more dramatic in regards to trying to rip away this kind of rip away the apparatus back to the hands of the public. But if there is any chance at all that the political apparatus, the state apparatus, is still in effect, and that apparatus can be used for the ends of the citizenry, and when I'm saying citizenry, I'm saying a broad mix, not just to the left. I'm talking about this kind of, look, I think the majority of the public is to the left on a lot of these issues. So let's just say, for sake of argument, that this kind of People's Party, you can make substantive changes. You're going to have to browbeat the shit out of Congress. But if you had enough people pushing on the system, yeah, you can make change. The question is, how do you get those people to be less complacent? It's funny, in the somewhat debate, or tepid debate that I had with Eleanor, you know, it was kind of making this point, like, if there's any path other than this kind of violent revolutionary thing, that path should be taken. I agree. We're in fuckery if we don't march in mass against money and super masses. I agree. It's I don't know how you shake people out of their complacency. That's where I'm at. That I don't understand that part. Like as I look at this, I fully don't understand it. I don't understand why they don't see this as exploitation. I don't get it. I understand that to some degree they're programmed in this way. So they go about their day, they go home, they rinse and repeat, and for the most part they believe that that's what means to have a life. They think that work and all this other stuff is actual having a life. It's amazing to me. We've transitioned from a slave plantation to this kind of people choosing their own plantation and being happy about it and calling it freedom. I find it fucking amazing. But that's the way it goes. They're willing to have 95% of the wealth go to the top 1%. I find that to be an amazing thing, that a country or state or any group of people, you have 100 slices of pizza. One guy comes in and takes 99 slices and tells the rest of the people that they can fight over that one slice. I find that to be fucking amazing. I find it to be amazing. So, without understanding why people do that, it's hard to know how you channel and wake them out of complacency. I suspect part of it has to do with, I got mine, you know, the world can go fuck itself. I have a family, I have my own life, I have this own thing that I need to deal with, I don't have time to get out here and do this other stuff. In which case it means that their life needs to get as difficult as possible in order for those people to look up from what they're doing. Look, some of this has to do with what do people expect their life should be. If you told somebody in France that they were going to have $50,000 of debt put over their heads for going to school, it wouldn't fly. It would be unthinkable. In the United States, it's just assumed. Some of this has to do with what the person believes that their particular state or their government or their living situation should be. What is my life worth? That type of stuff. But I don't know how you shake people out of complacency. There's this weird hegemonic view that markets should trump human beings. An unreal thing should trump actual human beings. That's a hegemonic view. Until that view changes, or at the very least until that can be pried away from people, it's hard to get them out of that complacency. So Jamal's notions are not based in present reality. The fact that the world is falling off a cliff, that is immensely based in present reality. The fact that you have issues with climate, you have issues with social upheaval, you have issues. Those things are flat fact. Those things are flat fact. If we're talking about changing things, and you're talking about this kind of, can the capitalistic system supply all the needs for everybody in the world? The answer is no. If your argument is, fuck those people, I got mine, then yes, I disagree with that. Meaning, if those people need to be clothed and fed and everything else, then you need to reorganize your society to do it. That's an evolved society. Now, if you're talking about what we have now, no, we do not have presently an evolved society. We have people like you who, for the most part, said, fuck them, I got mine. That's what we have. People and planet before profits. That would be nice. Trudy, eat the oligarchs. I don't want to eat anybody. Look, to some degree, there needs to be a certain compassion because they're sick in the head. They're not necessarily well. I don't mean that in a that sounds bad, but I don't mean it in a way that it sounds. Everybody in your society is being programmed by the society that you're interacting in. There's somewhat of a social pressure on it. Oligarchs have a certain idea of themselves. That idea of themselves is not based in any real reality. It's purely based on the game space. They're in a fantasy land. Like, they have access to things because they have this kind of profit and everything else, and the system itself gives them the stuff. But the system that they're talking about is not a real system. It's just this thing of perspective. Now, at some point, I would hope that the perspective changes and people turn around and do something different, but right now, that's not the case. Those people have started to believe something that they are somehow better, and that is fantasy thinking. That's immensely fantasy thinking. By the same token, you also have people in society who think those people are somehow better, which is sad. Yeah, that one's just sad. I often worry about that. In 18 U.S. Code Sedition Conspiracy Law, Clinton signed in 1994. David, there's oversimplification. We need to discuss what is possible before we have any hope of actualization. 02% of the population wouldn't feed anyway. it makes talk about climate change borderline illegal. Come on. I'm losing connection. Alright, I am losing connection. So, I'm going to end this here and hope this gets through at the very end. We've strayed away from the original topic about the Glen Ford article, but that's fine. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, we've strayed away from the original topic, and that's fine. I am going to go and see what Miss Thomas is doing and get dinner, because I am fading. But, look guys, I appreciate everybody who's showed up. Totally. Absolutely. Always do. So, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, and write, and subscribe. And of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks everyone.